We live on a planet occupied by over 8 billion human beings, each with their own separate story, background, family, friends, jobs, lives. 8 billion people sharing their individual personal experiences on this rock we call Earth. 318 million people live in the United States. 8 million live in New York, and just about 1 million live in my home state of Rhode Island. Now imagine, 1.5 million of those people just disappeared. They ceased to share the same space as you. They no longer have their jobs, their families, their friends, or their lives. They seem to disappear. Would you notice that they'd gone missing? Or would you simply just forget them? So at Thanksgiving, I asked my relatives to send me anything they had on our family tree. So this is what I got. Stuff, and stuff, and stuff. And in that stuff, I found more stuff that I didn't know what it was, and more stuff that I didn't know what it was. So I kind of just shuffled the papers around for a little while, waiting for something to make sense. And then I saw this. These are my great-grandparents. Now, I had a starting point. The family starts with a man named Messia Michaelia, who married a woman named Hagen. They went on to have 3 kids, Sarah, Arsen, and Oski. That's the Armenian side of the family. Oski went on to marry a man named Eddie Abdow, who was Lebanese. I call him Jiddu. Oski and Eddie had 2 kids, Sonia and Eddie. Sonia married an Italian man named Rich, and those are my parents. They had 2 kids, Alyssa and Brendan. And my uncle had 2 kids, Jay and Sarah. So I'm this really weird mix of Italian, Lebanese, and Armenian. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about Messia and Haganoush. Messia and Haganoush were both born in an Armenian village called Govdan, located in modern-day Turkey. They grew up together but didn't get married until later in their lives. Messia had left Govdan for Providence, Rhode Island in 1917, leaving behind his first wife and 5 children. But when he arrived here, he learned that he was the only person left alive in his family. The rest had been killed. Haganoush had remained in Armenia until 1921. By that time, she too had lost her first husband and her newborn son. Why is it that my great-grandparents' first families were killed, and why did they come to America in the first place? Well, it's kind of a long story. All the way through the 1800s, Armenia, its people, and a majority of the Eastern world were controlled by the Ottoman Empire, which, according to Google, doesn't exist. Ottomans considered Armenians to be beneath them, and were often mistreated. Armenians at this time had developed a rich cultural identity, becoming the first nation to adopt Christianity as its official religion, despite living in a Muslim-dominated portion of the world. 1908 saw the rise of the Young Turks, a Turkish or Ottoman movement centered around unifying Turkey, giving the country a singular identity. Non-Turks, aka Christians or Armenians, did not fit into the Young Turks' agenda. In 1914, World War I broke out. The Young Turks feared that Armenia would unite with the predominantly Christian Russia. So April 24, 1915 was the official start of the Armenian Genocide. Prominent figures throughout the Armenian community were rounded up and murdered. Thousands were forced to leave their homes, surrender their possessions, and march across the desert. Many were placed into labor camps. Men were often executed or overworked to death. Women raped, starved, and tortured. In 1914, there were over 2 million Armenians living within the crumbling Ottoman Empire. By 1922, under 400,000 remained. That's why my great-grandparents are here. Because they got out. Because they escaped genocide. But 1.5 million weren't that lucky. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about what truly defines a terrorist act. So naturally, I took the Global Terrorism Database and Googled, was the Armenian Genocide a terrorist act? And the search came back with a whopping 0 results. The GTD uses a list of criteria to define a terrorist act. First, the act must be aimed at attaining political, economic, religious, or social goals. Second, there must be evidence of an intention to coerce, intimidate, or convey some other message to a larger audience than the immediate victims. Lastly, the action must be outside context of legitimate warfare activities. So, I'm confused. Why does this still say 0? Well, first off, if labor camps, death marches through the desert, torture, rape, and the oppression and killing of millions of people doesn't constitute as legitimate acts of warfare, I can't tell you what does. We think that because this was 100 years ago, and because it was the terrorization of an entire country, we think that it exists outside the realm of terrorism, when in reality, the same thing is happening today. ISIS has risen, seizing control of Syria, enforcing their ideals on its people, and killing every person who disagrees with them. The Young Turks did the same thing. They became the government in Turkey, and it looks like the Islamic State might be on that path as well. But the most astonishing fact about the genocide is that not all of the world acknowledges that it actually happened. Turkey for 100 years literally has denied any responsibility of the genocide, and even the US doesn't officially acknowledge it happening, despite Obama saying on the campaign trail,
Those of you who aren't aware, there was a genocide that did take place against the Armenian people. We have seen a constant denial on the part of the Turkish government and others that this occurred.
7 years later, and the US still does not acknowledge the Armenian genocide happened. Yes, Obama. All Armenians have this same face that you do. But the reason we can't acknowledge the genocide is because we're such good allies with Turkey, and we don't want to mess up our bromance with them. Because... But clearly, it did happen. Because if it didn't, these memorials wouldn't be here. And my grandparents wouldn't have had their names engraved into this stone. And all these people would never have ended up in the US. And then ultimately, here. And it's because of this incident that I believe that governments are capable of committing an act of terror.